We are ready now to begin the session 4 on the meaning of religion. This is showing us two of the dimensions in regard to religion. That is the dimension of belief and guides to behavior that the religions have. The dimension of belief. The element of human belief in religion is an important dimension in the study of religion or religions, and I do suggest strongly that you watch this YouTube in your study of this particular unit. Now, here are different views of religion and God, and a brief description of them, the persons who hold them, and then you're going to write in your assignments your evaluation of these views. I hope you will not just write I agree or disagree with it, but I agree with this view because, and give some reasons for your belief of that. The view of theism is a view that God exists, that he is personal, he is related to the world and able to function. He's not like the high God who's gone and no longer connected to the world, but he is here and can perform miracles. Christians, Jews, and Muslims all hold the view of theism. Atheism is the opposite of that, does not believe that God exists. The major problem, according to atheism, is that there's evil in the world, and if there's a good God, there should not be evil in the world. And the second problem is there's no real proof that God exists. We can't prove it. David Hume and these other names that are not quite as familiar as his hold this view. Agnosticism is a little bit like that. It just doesn't say there is no God, but it says we can't prove his existence, and therefore we should not claim certainty for something we can't prove and give inconclusive evidence of. Thomas Huxley is the best name for this. Rudolf Otto and others hold to the religious experience. That is, they say that because people have personal and inward response to what they believe is an encounter with the divine, gives an idea that there is a God in existence. The feeling of the relationship that motivates and guides is an evidence of God. We've seen Sigmund Freud in many of our studies, and he says humans need assurance of a caretaker, and so they make up a being called God who will care for them. Freud's view is that religion is an illusion. His view is called psychoanalysis. Immanuel Kant is really not looked upon in religious studies as much, but he does say that our feelings that the world is unjust and our ideas that we should try to correct the injustices is some evidence that there's a God in existence and that we should believe in him. William James is perhaps the best known person in regard to belief with God. He says that we can legitimately make decisions based on our passionate natures if the matter is living, momentous, forced, and cannot be judged simply on intellectual grounds. What James is saying, and we'll study this more later, is that we have a right to believe. It is legitimate to believe, even if we can't absolutely prove our belief. Now, philosophy is high on the rational arguments for God's existence. Some people will go through these rational arguments and declare they do not prove that God exists. Others will take one or more of them. Let's see these four. There are others, and some people even believe in them strongly and others don't. The view called ontological argument by Anselm of Canterbury said since humans have in their minds the idea of a God who is greater than anything else, God then must exist. The idea that we believe in a God would be an evidence that he is there. The cosmological argument is based on the created world and says that there must be a first mover and a first cause to make all of the things in the world work together. Thomas Aquinas, the Roman theologian, would fall here. One argument that many people hold is design argument. The order and purpose that we see in the universe point to an intelligent creator. William Paley in his The Divine Watchmaker has been followed by Dembski and Davies, is saying that the design we see in the world is an evidence that God exists. The moral argument says that because people have a sense of what is right and wrong, this seems to be made into them, that this indicates that there is a God who causes this feeling of morality. Now, there's been a debate in philosophy between William Clifford and William James. I guess you could look at the two pictures there and decide which you agree with on the basis of who has a more luxurious beard, but then you'll have to decide that. Clifford came to say this: it is always wrong, everywhere, for anyone to believe anything on insufficient evidence. And he applied this to religion. If Clifford is right, believing in God without sufficient evidence, which there's not, holding to belief as a matter of faith, as some people would put it, is wrong. William James, on the other side, says, our passionate nature not only lawfully may, but must decide an option between propositions. He says when there's a genuine option that cannot by its nature be decided simply on intellectual grounds, to say under certain circumstances do not decide is just leaving the question open. The passionate decision, just like in deciding yes or no, is attended with the risk of losing the truth whichever way you decide. Let's go a little bit further. Here was Clifford's reason. Clifford used an account of a ship owner. He said, the ship owner incorrectly comes to a belief that the ship is seaworthy and allows it to begin the voyage. But the ship is not seaworthy. It sinks. The passengers all drown. The cargo is lost. Because of his belief in an untruth, that is, that the ship was seaworthy, the owner harmed the passengers and others, the families and the persons who became fearful of sailing. The owner is therefore, according to Clifford, ethically responsible for the passengers' deaths. Believing without evidence, one may harm others and may harm himself. Therefore, Clifford says it's always wrong to believe without sufficient evidence. William James, on the other side, wrote this book, The Will to Believe. He could have called it The Right to Believe. He says questions of belief leave us two options. We can protect ourselves from believing something false by just not making a decision until we have sufficient evidence. But we can also protect ourselves from missing out on something true by choosing to believe even when the evidence is insufficient. And James is going to come to say this second is the better alternative. The question that should be decided has got to be living, that is, it's got to be one that does have some possibility of an answer. It must be forced. We need to make it. It must be a big decision and incapable of being decided just on intellectual grounds. Now, James would say we don't just go on emotion and feeling. We keep looking for evidence, but we may make a decision in what we believe to be true in the meantime. The decision to believe without sufficient evidence is also a decision that we have the right to make. So it is lawful, acceptable, to rely on our passionate nature, feelings, and emotions in deciding on options without evidence. in the in this lesson, you're going to take sides in this argument, and you're going to decide on which of these you agree most. And I'll be interested to read your statements and your responses to others. Soren Kierkegaard is known sometimes as a melancholy Dane. He was a Danish philosopher and an existentialist. Existentialism means people who put feeling into their thinking and not just completely thinking in terms of rationalism. He stands at the forefront of a movement called radical theology. Kierkegaard said that subjective personal thinking is better than objective thinking. Objective thinking just relies on reasons, is intellectual, dispassionate about what to believe and what to do. Subjective thinking relies on faith, feeling, and passion in this quest. This subjective thinking about this thinking seeks not information about God, but a personal relationship with God. Kierkegaard is noted for his statement, a leap of faith. He says sometimes we just have to believe something without having an absolute clear certainty that what we're believing is correct. We leap and trust what we hope is true will be true. In the commitment of faith, we reach the point of accepting our true selves, and our personalities will be consolidated. So Kierkegaard replaced traditional objective knowledge of God with an inward experiential relationship with God. And he encourages us to take religion seriously, passionately, and experientially. I would say to you that Kierkegaard still has a great deal to say to us. Paul Tillich is, notice he didn't pass away until 1965, a Protestant theologian. He's also an existentialist. He taught that the effort to prove God's existence by rational means was a mistaken venture, and he thought it was actually harmful. He said it caused us to think of God as an invisible tyrant. He comprehended God as the ground of being and the ultimate concern. Religion is relationship on a personal level with this ultimate concern. Tillich's understanding has close ties with Rudolf Otto's idea of the holy, of a numinous experience, and it also is a good bit like William James's relationship with God as an illuminating experience. So these people saying experience with God is probably more important than rational thinking about God. Blaise Pascal is a person who invented what's called Pascal's wager in the idea of how should we believe about religion or about God. He says, which is better, to believe in God or not to believe in God? Well, if God exists, it's a whole lot better to believe in him, because the God who exists then will help us in our needs. If God does not exist, Pascal said, it's still better to believe in him. Some people don't agree with that. They say, oh no, if God does not exist, that will be no help to believe in him. But Pascal's wager is rather well known in philosophy. Clearly, the concept of believing, trusting, experience with the ultimate concern constitutes a significant dimension of religion. How we believe and what we believe is most important. Now, another part of this dimension is the fact that most religions provide some guide to proper behavior and proper conduct. For instance, Christianity has the Ten Commandments. You are somewhat familiar with them. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not. And this is a guidance. We also find in the New Testament several guides to conduct. Buddhism teaches the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is listed here for you. And you can see that if you followed the Buddhist Eightfold Path, you would be a good person, just as if you followed the Ten Commandments and the other commandments, you would be a good person. Islam and Christianity both have commands for living. Here is a comparison of the commands in the Quran and the commands in the Bible. Notice that the Quran says, God has made a sacred duty for you, ascribe nothing as equal with God. And the Ten Commandments, no other God beside me, no image, don't bow down to them. The Quran teaches aniconism, which prohibits making forms for help in worship and art. This is more prohibited in the Hadith, but it's in the Quran as well. The Quran, be good to your parents, honor your father and your mother, and the Ten Commandments. The Quran has, you shall not kill your children on a plea of want, and there's not anything quite like that in the Ten Commandments. You shall not approach lewd behavior, whether open or in secret. The Ten Commandments, you shall not commit adultery. The Quran never says anything exactly like, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. That commandment does not just mean you will refrain from cussing and using God's name in profanity. It means you will take God seriously. You will understand what God teaches and act on it. Now, you shall not take life except by way of justice and law. You shall not kill. The Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill, actually, you shall not murder. That commandment does not address capital punishment. The Ten Commandments says you shall not steal and you shall not covet your neighbor's material goods. The Quran says not approach the property of an orphan except to improve it. Give full measure and weight in justice. No burden shall be placed on any soul but that which he can bear. The same teaching is in several passages of the Bible, but not precisely in the Ten Commandments. You shall not steal, though, is somewhat the same. And if you give your word, do it justice, even if a near relative is concerned. Fulfill your obligations before God. Thus does God command you, that you may remember. And there's not a remember the Sabbath. Muslims are not actually commanded to worship at the masjid or the mosque on Friday. But religions will have both a matter of belief and a matter of guidance in the ways of living.